What's up, my friends? Welcome to another episode of Casual Creative Convos with Zach and Rob. And so this Wednesday morning, we're gonna have Zach lead us off with some poetry. Zach, how you been, my friend?
So beautiful, so beautiful. It's warm, sunny out here in Bogota. Just got back from my morning ritual, got a little bit of movement in. I'm feeling really good starting the day, so it's nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, so this is a poem that I've been reflecting on. It's like the concept of love, like on a bigger sense, like what the feeling of love. All right, so love is sacred, wild, free, liberating, like a breath of fresh air, being cleansed by crystalline waters, warmed by a midnight fire, laying on Mother Earth, looking up at the night sky, pondering the mysteries of the universe. Love is everything and nothing, the space between, the space unseen, a sacred dream.
I love it. Hmm. Yeah. What that makes me think of is, just like you said, the unseen. I think that that's a big part of what I've been thinking about lately is, how so much of our world is focused on the physical reality, and that's just what's seen, which makes up like 1% of what exists. Like 99% of, the room I'm in, the room you're in, the world we're in is just empty space. And it's kind of crazy to think about. Like, we're so focused on what we can see and is tangible and we can hold and touch and feel with our senses, but there's so much that's unseen that is arguably more powerful or arguably more important, as it makes up 99 plus percent of what's actually, around us.
Mhm. Yeah, so that was kind of my reflection as well, like that the sense of or the feeling of love or what is love. I was kind of just playing around with that, scratching the surface, and I think it's really important for us as a whole, right, as a humanity, to like really come back to understanding what is love for us, like collectively, because we are so caught up in our fear that um, it can be really hard for us sometimes to really connect with our heart. So been really questioning that recently.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just listening to the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, which is actually a really good book. I've seen it pop up so many different times over the past couple of years that's been out, and
Mm.
never really felt called to it. And then I was watching a video with him on YouTube. I was like, wow, this guy is legit. He knows his stuff. And so I started diving into a lot of his videos the past couple of weeks and got his book. And one thing that he talks about is that most people operate from a place of fear and stress, which again, you and I know that. But just as it relates to, people going out to get a job and then teaching like the whole system we put into place is a fear-based approach is, you know, money is not good. I don't need money, but also at the same time working for money to work and then pay bills and then work and then pay bills and then stress about money. And it's like this whole cycle he talks about that, his rich dad is basically his friend's dad, who is an entrepreneur. And he has a philosophy that money works for me. I don't work for money. And I think that's a very cool perspective. And, really kind of shifting from that state of scarcity and that, need to always do more. I feel like we're so caught up in doing and kind of coming back to that, physical reality, always needing to do more. But if things are working for us, that's a whole different paradigm shift. And that kind of comes back to, really using the energy and the space around us to work for us. So it's definitely, I'm not quite concrete with how I interpret all that right now, but it's a lot of the similar themes that are going along in my head in terms of, how can we utilize the non-physical reality to improve our life circumstance, whether that's the physical manifestation or just our experience through it. And it's a crazy world we're living in right now, that I think that this is a time I feel called to start really diving into some of the non-physical components of our reality.
Yeah, and it's all connected. The non-physical is like the spiritual, it's the unseen, it's the deeper meaning, right? It's the deeper understanding of what we do see as well. And uh, a good way to see it is this, like, you imagine with your eyes closed. um, we think that there's nothing there with our eyes closed, but actually with our eyes closed, that's when our imagination comes alive. When we close our eyes, we can really see like a lot more actually sometimes,
Right.
or hear and listen to ourselves. So I imagine, like, really the beauty is in exploring the darkness, like the shadows, like when our eyes are closed. It's really where the treasure lies for us, like collectively. Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful things in the world, in this physical world, but at the same time there's a lot of beauty in the stillness, the space that we have for ourselves when we can really reflect and be alone as well. And it's like in the darkness we find our treasure.
I love that. Yeah, and even just, closing my eyes right now as you said that, it reminded me, I forget which book I read it in, but basically I think it's like 90% of our energy in terms of our senses is through our eyes. Like we use so much energy because we're so visually dependent as a human species, a human being, that, if we can't see it, we don't believe it. Like the saying goes, seeing is believing. And it's crazy to think, just with a little 10-minute meditation, a lot of times it's not even the meditation that recharges us. It's just the fact that we close our freaking eyes for 10 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, it's like if we're awake for 16 hours a day, our eyes aren't supposed to be open for 16 hours straight. Like that's a lot of time. And that's why it's like, people get headaches because it's just a strain, especially when we're staring at a screen. Forget the light aspect of it, but just the narrow focus that's so, small, as opposed to looking at, like, if we're looking at nature, it's a broad horizon, which, it comes back to the fact that narrow focus stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. Kind of come back to what we started with, is the state of stress, the state of fear, and, the fight or flight mode. Whereas when we're looking at a bigger picture, it's a parasympathetic, which is, why oftentimes we get to the top of a mountain or a hike, we feel that, that, like, wow, I feel relaxed now, like looking at the great expanse of things. And so on that same note, I think it's just a practice I'm looking to implement more of, is just, closing my eyes more often as I can. And also, I forget who said it. I got to start writing down when I remember these things or hear these things. But the saying basically goes that we shouldn't be sitting. Anytime that we're sitting, we should try to do that same activity lying down, because humans are meant to like stand, squat, and lie down. We're not meant to sit at this like angular position. So I've been also getting into the practice of, if I'm checking messages on my phone or creating a post, I'm lying down. I'm not sitting down doing it, or at least I'm reclined at an angle that my feet can be up and I'm not, in this like 90-90 position. And
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy, just all these little things that we've been so accustomed to that may not be for our benefit. A lot of these tiny little tricks, like, closing your eyes for a few minutes, a few times a day, or lying down instead of sitting, can make a huge difference.
we're in the matrix. We're fully in it. But the beauty, I think, I don't know if you know Angelo. He's also Imperium. He said recently, I shared with him one of my poems, and he brought up something recently that was really interesting. It was about the matrix, and really that matrix means, it's also like another word for like the earth too. like the root of that. Matrix also is like just the connection, like you're in the material, like the matter, right? So in a way we talked about like, avoiding the matrix, or really being in the matrix when we're on social media and interacting in our life. But really, yeah, we are in the matrix. Like we're in this simulation of of the world, and it's like we can choose. I feel like we can choose what we use in the matrix and what we do within it, and we can reprogram by just doing it ourselves. Kind of being the virus by just not doing the same thing that everyone else is doing.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is too is, the matrix isn't even a bad thing. I think it's kind of easy to label, the system that we've created as human beings, using our grid of technology and our whatever we want to, businesses and, metropolis cities and all this type of stuff. We can label it as bad, but it's not bad. It's it's our perception and our usage of it. Like, I mean, just like with anything, I mean, you can say, a rock is bad because you could hurt someone with it, because you could throw a rock and hurt someone with it. But it's like, it's not the rock that's bad, it's the use and intention behind it. And that's why I truly believe that, all the great technologies and all the great pieces of this reality we've created are actually, just neutral. There is no good or bad to anything. And it's just a matter of the use and intention. I think that that's where we as humans have such a great challenge for ourselves, is that, other animals, like if humans didn't exist on the planet, everything is good, because we have a choice. Animals are just going off their instinct. Animals, antelope gets eaten by a lion. That's not a bad thing. It just is. That's the way that the earth keeps its balance. But for us, where we have a choice, where we're thinking beyond our instincts and we're really saying, hey, you know I'm going to choose to do this that way, or I can choose to do it that way. Animals don't really think like that. Animals are kind of just, going with the flow, and which keeps everything in balance. So I think that a big challenge that we as humans need to come to terms with is that things aren't really bad. It's just our usage of them. And I mean, same thing like you think of with like people say like guns are bad because they kill people, but guns also have made hunting a lot easier. So,
Mm,
and that's part of the cycle of life, and we can use that as a good tool. So the tool itself isn't bad, or it can
mm,
protect you from a crazy person. If someone's coming at you with, all these weapons, and you can now protect yourself and your family, like, that tool, which was seen as bad, can now be a good thing. So it's really, in my opinion, we need to start focusing on not labeling things as good or bad, but recognizing that we as the user, our intention is what, tips the scales as to that is using for good or for, I don't even like the word bad, for, or for evil, or whatever word goes there. But, just basically my point is that we need to be more mindful of how we use all the tools at our disposal.
yeah, that's what so Ram Dass says, like everything can be a vehicle for our liberation. Every single thing in every moment as well. And just reflecting on that as well, I was thinking about this concept of suffering as well. Thinking about the world at the moment, there is a lot of suffering, and then at the same time, what's happening is actually the best vehicle that we have for our collective liberation. Like if this didn't happen, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Like we wouldn't be reflecting. So so it goes back to what you're saying. Is it good or bad? Or is there something deeper that's happening? And I've been really understanding this, and it seems like there's something that's deeper. There's a lot deeper that's happening after also hearing about how ancient traditions, ancient prophets, they were all talking about there's going to be a day, there's going to be a moment when there's like a collective awakening, like when there's a big change, there's or some like transformation. and it seems like it's happening right now.
It does. And, you know, I heard an interesting figure the other day that when the revolution happened, I'm not a history person. I don't know what year, when exactly that was, what year, but it was 3% of the population had a mindset shift. Just 3%. Like when I think of a revolution, I'm thinking, oh, like 51%, like the vast majority of people. But no, it was 3% of the people said, you know, enough is enough. We want change and we're going to go after it. So hearing that number, you know, I don't think we're quite at the 3% threshold of, you know, as you said, the awakening process, but I think that's right around the corner. And I
Mm.
believe that we're working towards that, you know, new revolution of humanity and consciousness. And I think that that's a really exciting time. And of course, it's also very scary because there's a lot of change, there's a lot of chaos emerging,
Yeah.
but there's also, you know, and there will be some collateral damage, and that sucks. And it's really unfortunate for people that are on the butt end of that. And, you know, we can sit here and express our gratitude for, you know, not dealing with some of that collateral damage. But to say, you know, also on the same coin, to say no one is dealing with anything difficult right now, I think is just not true. We're all going through, you know, a big energetic shift, whether we're aware of it or not. And I think it's easy to sit here and say, oh, you know, I'm immune to this. Like my life is perfect, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, the collective consciousness is changing and that's affecting us at some level. And it's exciting. It really is. So I think that if we recognize this as an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to better ourselves as individuals and as a species, this could turn from, you know, what was once deemed the biggest tragedy in the world to, you know, a really great period of growth for humanity.
Yeah, well, you're hitting on the point. I think it's the concept of suffering. And a lot of times we think of suffering as only a bad thing. Like, okay, this person is sick and they're in a lot of pain. Maybe they are, they don't have any money or anything, right? But the suffering on both ends is really, it's really key to our liberation, I think, because on the end of people without money, or maybe they don't have food, the people that um, have less suffering, we can consciously choose to help those, like, and relieve the suffering in the world. And I think that's a big shift that's happening. It's more in, I see it's more in the relief of suffering, and also the shift. I think there's a lot of suffering in the world from people that are living in that's like scarcity mindset of always wanting more
Mm,
without appreciating what they have.
right.
So it's like both sides. There's so much um, suffering, and what you see is like a lot of times the people with the most are the most unhappy, have the most health problems, and so they have suffering, right? On the other side of the scale, people that are more connected with community, maybe with nature, don't have a lot of money. You see that though they don't have a lot of things and material things, they have less health problems and they're happy. And so I think there's somewhere where we meet halfway and find a way to learn from each other. Like, how can we not only care about like ourselves, but learn from the people that are also suffering, like from their pain, and how can we relieve their pain and also relieve our own like suffering and pain that's happening and showing up.
Right. And I think it comes back to, you know, how we look at this tool of money, which in my opinion is just an energy. It's a very convenient way to exchange energy. And, you know, we can look at the fact that Warren Buffett has money problems. He has different money problems than you and I have, but he has money problems. And that's
Mm.
not to say that his problems are better or worse than ours. They're just different. And that's okay. Like we can easily sit here and say, oh, he's this multi-billionaire. How can he have money problems? But it's like, he does. They're just at a larger scale. It's like similar things. He's trying to figure out how to provide for his family, pay the bills and, improve businesses and whatever. It's just a different scale. And I think that, I like to think of the fact that we're never going to have a life of no problems. We're always going to have problems. We just need to learn to, one, accept all that is, but also strive for more. It's kind of like the balance of, accepting what is, but also not settling for something if you feel that you can do better. And it's kind of just comes back to that duality, that yin yang. Is like, look, I think Troy Casey, what does he say? Is like something about always improving and taking no shit. Something along those lines. That it's like, look, I'm not going to just be, beaten down and berated for things, but I'm also going to accept things as they are. And I'm also going to be looking at improvements. So I think also too, it reminds me of Viktor Frankl, who survived, the Holocaust and like Nazi concentration camps, and thinking about reading his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And it's just crazy to hear how at peace he was. Someone who literally had nothing besides his physical body that was frail and his mind. That's all he had. He maybe would get a piece of bread, once a week or whatever, that was stale. But he came out, not only did he survive, which is incredible in and of itself, but he came out and said, I appreciate that I went through that, because now I have this perspective to share.
Mm.
And that isn't like, I don't know if I could do that, honestly. Like, I don't know if I could survive that and then also come out and be like, hey, this is actually a really great experience, I'm going to write about that. But to show that one person can do that just shows what's possible for humanity, and how the power of our mind and our perception is so much more powerful than we give it credit for.
Mm. And this is really making me think about the power of really having a clear vision or purpose, and values as well. Because if you have like that clear vision and purpose, you know exactly how you want to live, in the sense of like what you want more of. Because I feel like a lot of people search for more like things, like, oh, I want more material, more money, but that's not actually going to bring a lot of fulfillment, right? Or peace. But maybe if you have a vision or a dream, and that's what you're working towards as well, like that actually will bring so much more fulfillment, if even if you're not making in the moment like a lot of money doing that. It's like really putting your energy in, and like what you're saying, like Viktor Frankl, he had moments when he had nothing, right? His mind, just his mind, his body and spirit, and he was there. And think about, I feel like that's such a good metaphor about life, like, and also work. It's like to realize that if you go towards your passion, you have that, like you have spirit, you have that energy still, even though you may not have the most amount of like money or the most things and the most accolades. You have that sense of like deep passion and love within you, which is impossible to actually um, it's not tangible. It's like impossible to actually say like, okay, this is what I have, right? But you can feel it within you.
Mm.
And that's what every person is actually, I would say every person is on that same journey of feeling, happy and wanting to feel love within.
Yeah, and it makes me think of what Paul Chek always says, is that if you have a dream that's big enough, you don't need a crisis. And there are so many people that wait for a crisis as a wake-up call to start, doing what they love. Or, it's a near-death experience, the death of a loved one, or some tragic event that then triggers them to do a complete 180 and say, holy shit, I've been wasting my life working this job I hate, being around people that don't bring me up, they really bring me down, to then start thinking, what do I want to do with my life? So if you have a dream that's big enough, you don't need a crisis. And I feel like that's one thing that I've really noticed throughout this whole COVID experience, is that a lot of the people who, you know, have a very clear vision, you know, you being one of them, and many other people that I often connect with, is that the people that have been the most clear on their vision are the ones that are still moving forward, that weren't quite as affected by all that's going on. And, you know, we can call that privilege, we can call that whatever we want to call it. But at the end of the day, I attribute that to having a clear vision and saying, you know, whatever happens is going to happen. That's outside of my control. I'm going to continue on this path. Yeah, there may be now a freaking huge roadblock that I have to figure out a way to get around, but I'm going to get around it, and I'm not going to let it stop me. And yeah, it may slow me down. It may temporarily stop me or force me to pause and step back. But at the end of the day, my dream is so big that I'm going to continue to push through this no matter what. And as I said, I think that's been very clear to me of those who are, you know, very much aligned with their purpose and their intentions and their dreams throughout this time. And it's, you know, I find myself being more and more drawn to those type of people because they're the people that are allowing me and supporting me and continuing to pursue my own dream and passion and intention. Because it's like, all right, guys, like, or gals, you know, we're doing this together. We have this dream, and your dream's a little bit different than mine, but at the end of the day, they're all very similar. We're working towards our dream, and that's what matters. So it's become really a great support system where in a time of, you know, isolation and Zoom calls, which, you know, isn't quite the same as person to person, but it's still good. And, you know, like we were talking about last time, the whole mask era, we can't see human emotion. In times like this that are so bizarre and so easy to feel distanced and, you know, isolated, it's so refreshing and so essential, I'd even say, to be connected with people that are pursuing their dreams and are really driven with their purpose.
Yeah, I'll hold to that one for sure. Um, so I have a question for you then. So what is your dream?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that I've been looking to become more clear on because part of this situation that's happened has definitely influenced that dream where, you know, my ultimate goal is to have my own homestead on a 20 plus acre plot with running water, you know, raising my family there, you know, growing a lot of my own food, being able to be location independent with my work, writing. You know, I really love creating, you know, content. I wanted to be doing live community events. I enjoyed doing the podcast. I like traveling. So this is all kind of things that, you know, I kind of had this vision that it was more of like a 3 to 5 year plan in terms of getting my homestead and, you know, starting that, a lot of that type of living in the wilderness more. But with all that's happened, it's kind of pushed that forward quite a bit because I was, you know, kind of thinking like, wow, like with all that's going on, I may want to do that a little bit sooner. So lately, it's definitely, again, every challenge is a good thing. So kind of it's forced me to become more clear. So, you know, if you asked me 10 months ago what my 1 year vision, 3 year, 5 year would have been different. So I'm currently honing that in, and it's still that same vision, but now the time frame is a little bit different. But ultimately, what my ideal life looks like is that I have my own homestead, it has running water, you know, a spring on it, you know, swimmable water. It's in the mountains or very close walking distance to the mountains. Um, and, you know, I'm connecting with people on a regular basis, both in person and virtually. I'm doing a lot of writing and creation and sharing, and also just constantly growing myself. And, you know, being a father is a big goal of mine and a big driver that, you know, I really love kids, and I really look forward to the day that I have my own kids, that I can, you know, instill some of the things at a very young age that I feel I didn't learn until I was like 25. So a lot of those just core values and, you know, doing the best I can to raise a happy, healthy family. But that's kind of the extremely long answer to your question there.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think it's like a collective dream as well. Like I really see that it's not just you that has that dream, like I also have something very similar as well. And a concept that I was walking through the park, I think it was on Monday, and it just hit me like this concept of like mine versus ours. It's like I don't know. I was just hearing you talk about that. It seems like community and family is really an important part of your dream. And I think an important part of community or family, that mindset is this one word actually that's really simple. It's ours.
Right.
Because then you realize that if it's all about ours, like what we're collectively doing everything for the common dream
Right.
together. And realizing that, so that I feel like the mindset of mine was that it's the separation, it's there,
Right.
but I think it's like the inclusion of the hours too. Like what you say too, like in Paul Check, I, we all, but the hours is I think sometimes it gets neglected in the
Right.
sense of community, like, because when we're in community, it's the beautiful part is that, um, there's one person that their responsibility is maybe to look after the garden. Then there's people in the community, their responsibility is to look after the children. Um, and then other people that are cooking, other people that are doing construction, and other people that are like connecting, like communicating with people in other places and getting more people to come and telling stories, sharing like art. So it's really interesting to look at it from that perspective of like, okay, this is all shared, and the fact that even when we leave the earth, what is actually like going to be mine to take with me?
Nothing. Nothing.
What is it? Yeah. So it's like it's all ours, like it's all
Right.
collective too. But like the illusion is that we're playing in the illusion that this is mine and that's someone else's, like the separation.
Yeah, I think that's a very important distinction because I think that, especially in the Western world, we have this very I focus, independent, possessive type of attitude. This is my car. This is my house. This is my pool. This is my lawn. There's, someone I know who didn't let his kids play on his front lawn because he wanted to look good. Because he didn't want, it's like, why do you have a lawn with kids if they're not allowed to walk on it because you want to look good to your neighbors? Like, it's like this whole ego gratification. And this is actually, I'm glad you said it, because this is actually kind of an alternative or potentially the same on the greater scale of a dream of mine is to actually live in a community on hundreds of acres where
Mm.
everyone has their own, 20-acre plot or 10-acre plot or 5-acre plot that we can, create our own dreams, but ultimately there's a collective. So I kind of envision like this giant circle. Everyone has like their little pie piece that meets in the middle where there's a common area. So that's kind of like the common space, the our space. But everyone still has their own little slice because I do
Mm.
appreciate my solitude and my introverted side that I like to have, the freedom to create things and just kind of play around with experiments that I know isn't going to be detrimental to someone else if I'm just kind of playing around and, make a mistake. So that's kind of like a bigger dream of mine that I would love to live in a place that's, really community driven and allows everyone to have their own space, but also as a whole is, kind of like you said, I do this piece, you do that piece,
Mm.
I'm growing carrots and beets this year. You're growing, lettuce and chard this year. And then we're going to switch the next year to keep the soil, healthy, and we're going to rotate. So maybe it's, 10 families on a 200 acres, 20 acres each, whatever it's broken up, however. And that's kind of, also a great way, I think, in terms of children to have different influences. That's one thing that this Rich Dad Poor Dad book has really reminded me of is that, we have this idea is like, oh, I have one dad, I have one mom, and they're, and then I have one teacher every year, and those basically 3 people are basically teaching me how to live life. Whereas let's say, in more of a community, if you have 10 families and, potentially that's 20 fathers, 20 mothers who are all working together to raise, 20 kids, 40 kids, however many kids. But I really, and then you have grandparents mixed in there as well. Now you have the elders in there with perspectives. So I also have this vision of a community based lifestyle that's, kind of off the grid. I still, as I said, I still really love, modern things. Like I still love, the city for certain things. I don't want to live in the city, but there's value to that. And I love, traveling to new places. So I don't want to just be a freaking hermit who's, not connected with the rest of the world. But I like the idea of living in a community where we can all grow together, but still allowing the introverted side of me to flourish in my own space. So that's kind of an expanded version of the dream that, maybe that's 10 years down the road, maybe it's 20 years down the road. I don't know. But I really, at some point in my life, would love to grid a group of people, like us, myself, you, Ed, Jordan, a lot of our similar thinking friends who bring a lot of value to the table and could really intermingle our knowledge and wisdom and experience and teachings to each other and just the next generation. And I think that it excites me to think about that possibility.
Yeah, it's so exciting for the future, for sure. I see, so where I fit in, I see my role as like a traveling teacher or student, actually, traveling student. And what I've been doing a lot throughout my journey is like researching communities and researching like how did other places or communities, how do they start, how they form, what's their dynamic as well. And I think that's really important because I realized that this isn't like I mean, it's not like a new age thing. This is something that we're going back to our roots, like where we came from. So it's really important to study and learn from the indigenous cultures in this moment because that's how they live. They live in community, like they live with family, and the cultures that have been able to survive are they have so much to share and to teach. So it's like finding what's been working pretty much and then implementing it right now. And then but I think the other thing that is really important is finding the elders from those ancestral traditions, is their wisdom is basically the wisdom that we probably need in order to keep going and to actually have our dream be manifested, because the elders are dying off and we're not taking care as much like of the elders, but they have so much experience, they've seen so much that we haven't seen, we just heard about, like going through different wars and in different, just in general, just different events in the past. And so finding those elders is really challenging
Right.
because they're not everywhere and they're kind of dying. But it's really important for us to like absorb their wisdom if we can.
Yeah, and I think one key part of what you said there, and when I was talking with Eddie and Jordan the other day, is this idea of being open to everything but attached to nothing. And I think that that's really where we can look at all these different cultures, these different philosophies, and say, look, I'm open to everything you have to share with me. I may not use all of it because it may not ring true to me in my personal life experience, but I'm open to learning everything you have to offer. And if I can just use 1% of what you do to improve my life, like that's a
Mhm.
big improvement. If I can go to 100 different cultures and take 1% of what I think is the best piece from all those and kind of make it my own, that's kind of, how I go about things as well, is that, even in terms of like dieting, like, people talk about, oh, carnivore or vegan or whatever. It's like, well, maybe I'm going to use piece of carnivore, which is, eating more organ meats. Or maybe for vegan, it's, maybe it is really important to spend a few days a week or a few days a month just eating completely plant-based and no meats or anything like that. Or, whatever the philosophy is. Or when I was living in Asia, is like, learning a lot of their philosophies of, slowing down and being present and really being partnered with the land instead of reaping and wrecking the land. And, I think also a lot of it is just also recognizing what structures of our society are, true to me. What part of our society do I need to accept? And like you said, with the elders, right now we kind of live in this age where we just ship off the elders to a home, like a nursing home. And it was kind of funny. I forget who brought it up, but the idea of when COVID happened, it was like, oh, we need to save the old people. And someone was like, you mean the same old people that you have just been shipping off to nursing homes and just basically leaving there? It's like, you mean those old people that you clearly cared so much about before, you just shipped them off to a home and never visited them? Like, it's like this whole, it's an interesting paradigm. And also, the whole fact that, the idea of, like, we're talking about community growth is like the idea of monogamy. And, is a polyamorous relationship, is there benefit to that? Maybe there is. I'm open to the idea of it. I'm not saying that one way is better or another. And I think that just like any diet, that's the best, for an individual. And I think that it's important not to shame people. Like, people look at Utah, how like they just passed a law recently that like a man can have multiple wives. And it's like, why do we say that's wrong? Like that's a religious belief that it's like, saying that, oh, like everyone should be monogamous. It's like, why do you care? Like, why do you care what your neighbor does in terms of that? And so it's interesting to me to just recognize all these different pieces of, culture that people accept as being right or wrong at like a moral level. And it's like, I think it's really just being open-minded to every and all possibilities, and, not really knocking something until you try it, and not saying everyone needs to go out there and, be carnivore or be vegan or be polyamorous or whatever, but, kind of just be open to it and accept when people are different. And I think that that's a big challenge right now in the world with the politically heated climate, that people aren't willing to listen to another side, and people are so caught up in defending their side and attacking the other side that there's no conversation going on right now. It's basically just hiding behind a bunker and throwing a projectile and hoping it hits your target, and hoping that then they'll change to come to your side. But at the end of the day, I think it just comes down to being open to everything and attached to nothing.
So what do you think about this as well? Like, I was reflecting on what you were saying. Do you think we're lacking true spiritual leaders, or in general leaders that are lacking something holistically?
I think it's both. I mean, I think that we are lacking spiritual leaders, and we're lacking, leaders that think and act holistically. I listened to did you listen to the Kanye West and Joe Rogan podcast?
Oh wow, yeah. Well, Kanye West on Joe Rogan. Wow,
That
yeah.
was actually really good. And, because he's running for president. And, after listening to that, I don't think that he is, the best presidential candidate for our country, but I think that he would be a great presidential advisor. The way that he thinks is very holistic. It is very spiritual. And, I heard a lot of feedback of people saying, oh, like Kanye is just crazy, but it's like they're showing a 2-minute clip, but he would talk about one point for 15 minutes, go off in 10 different tangents, but then always tie it back together. And it was actually very impressive to hear him talk about that. And it made me recognize that, however you feel about Donald Trump, it's like he's a non-politician who won office. And now we have someone like Kanye West, who's a non-politician running for office. And Kanye West, I think, is more in the right direction. Again, I think that he can be a little indecisive at times and a little, spontaneous, and I don't want to, reckless is the right word, but, I think that listening to him talk, it made me recognize, wow, we really do need someone who thinks holistically. We need someone who is, more spiritual. and someone who is thinking about it from every side. And he made some very valid points as to why he'd be a good president. You know, he's traveled the world more than most people. He spoke with leaders from different countries. You know, right now, which I didn't know, he's focused on creating affordable housing and organic farming programs, that building communities that grow all the food there and only eat their own food that they grow, and like all these little things I had no idea he was doing. And you know, he's also making clothing and shoes, and he's making music and producing. Like, he knows business, and he's done investing. Like, he's very much got his hands in many buckets. So it's interesting to hear that perspective. And you know, it makes me think of someone like Marcus Aurelius, who was, you know, a Roman emperor, who was basically a philosopher. He was a like a holistic minded philosopher who really put, you know, philosophy at the forefront of his decisions and the betterment of all beings. And I think that, yeah, the long answer to your question, I think we do need more, you know, spiritually inclined leaders, not so much religious, you know, attachment, but just, you know, the spiritual open mind. It's not to say religion's a bad thing, but, you know, I think that in the current climate of things, I think it would be good to have more holistic minded, you know, open minded individuals that are less so focused on, you know, beating their opponents or, you know, tearing someone down, but really focus on, you know, moving forward and bringing everything together.
Mm, yeah, yeah, definitely. I definitely resonate with that as well. And I was thinking about this, that I think what people find attractive, and even like people like Donald Trump or Kanye West, they find the authenticity really, really attractive, right? And I think that's so key. Like no matter what you're doing, just to be doing what is authentic to your journey. And you look at Kanye West's journey now, like looking back, it's all like up and down, like crazy things happening, but he was just doing it. He was just being his authentic self, like, um, which happens to be a lot of work with the shadow. You know, actually allowing your shadow to be expressed, and not caring, sometimes not caring about what people will say or think about you, and just really allowing yourself to, you know, allow those parts of yourself to come out. Because
Right.
eventually you're going to like, so you learn or you learn. It's like you're either learning now or you're learning later in this process of life. So if you're living your truth, like your authentic life and being your authentic self, you're going to learn from maybe the most from that and grow the most just from saying like, okay, this is my truth, this is like my passion, I'm going towards it, versus trying to please others and stick to society and family, like all those opinions. So I think it's really powerful to see those people that, you know, yeah, like Kanye West, where they just lived authentically. You know, he was a rapper. Like if you go back and listen to his lyrics, like they were very conscious too. And back in the day, they were probably the most conscious. Old, like the first Kanye West songs were like
Really
hit.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the shadow, because that's really how I feel. And I don't want to get all too political, but you know how I feel about, you know, Donald Trump as the president. He's kind of the he exposes a shadow of our, you know, of our population. Yeah, it's
Mm,
I hear people say that that orange faced whatever is always making fun of people and calling people names. And it's like, do you not just hear what you just said? You just called this person a name for calling people names. It's like, it's a very clear depiction of, you know, the fact that he is a projection of the shadow of many people, and the same things that they criticize him for, they're very often doing themselves. And, you know, people are saying like, oh, you know, he makes fun of people, but then they're making fun of him. Oh, he tears people down, but they're just focused on tearing him down. And it's
mm,
just very, it's almost comical to kind of watch this unfold as people are, you know, basically projecting what they don't like about themselves onto this man. but with that being said, he is by no means perfect. He has a
Yeah.
lot of inner work he needs to go through. But with that being said, it's just interesting the projections that we use on people and how he really is, a perfect example of, someone who needs to do some inner work and someone who needs to focus on their shadow, and all the people who hate him really, in my opinion, kind of hate that aspect of themselves. And that's why they're projecting those exact things that they're contradicting themselves on. And of course, that's a generalization for a large part, but it's a common theme I see. And of course there are exceptions to the rule, and I totally understand why people don't like the guy. But yeah, it is an interesting climate that I think that it is my hope that obviously whatever this next election brings isn't going to be great either way, the way I look at it. But it's my hope that in 2024 that maybe we are able to learn from this and really
Mm.
use some of the philosophies that Kanye West presents in terms of holistic way of thinking. And, hopefully we have some more, what I think we need, non-politician leaders, more spiritual leaders, more, human leaders, not people that are in it for the money, people that are in it for the humanity and the planet. So it's, an interesting world we live in for sure. But I do believe, like we kind of started with coming full circle, that at the end of the day, things are working out in the right direction. And I think this is also part of the spiritual path, is having, someone in power that people don't like or love. It's kind of, a love or hate with this guy. And, kind of seeing that duality, I think, is an important part of our collective human journey to kind of overcome those aspects within ourselves, and really focus on improving ourselves and improving. It's made a good focus, as COVID has, to really focus on local businesses and small businesses and all that. So I think that all these things in the long run, again, it's just a tool, and it's how we use the tool that can make it good, or can stop us from going forward.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I love that. It's it's like suffering. I think I guess for me, like observing suffering or pain, like the shadow, like all these things is so key right now. And it's key to our liberation, like collectively, to observe our shadow, to observe the things that we don't like about ourselves, that we're ashamed of, and use the challenges as a way to grow together as well. It's like the suffering is such a powerful vehicle for our own liberation, though it's really painful too. And but we're in it, and we have this choice to either um, we can be completely in it and go with it and say there's no option, there's nothing else that we can do, or we can work with it, like what you're saying, work with it as a tool for our liberation collectively. So that means really coming together as well. And so, yeah, community is so key.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, just to kind of close that thought off, is, you know, with all that being said, is suffering is a tool. And there are also people who are not very equipped to using that tool of suffering. So that's where, we need to, as people who are maybe a little bit more equipped with the tool of suffering, have a better relationship with that notion and that tool, to really support others who maybe don't have, the best relationship with pain or suffering or shadow work, and really, leading by example and sharing tools, other tools that they can use to enhance that tool of suffering. And I think that that's also a big part of, my journey and your journey, is just kind of sharing what I do and you do and we do to, help others that are maybe a little bit less fortunate, or just need a little bit of support, because we all need support in one way or another, whether we think that we're better than someone or not. We all need help. We can't do this whole thing alone. So I think it's important to, recognize that we're all in this together. The earth is one big organism, and we're only strong as our weakest part. So if we continue to grow together and learn together, and we will rise up, we will overcome. And I do believe that we can return to a place like the Garden of Eden, and really just get there. And I think that just comes with working with nature, working with each other, and focusing on collaboration, and letting go of this Darwinian theory of survival of the fittest and competition, and really shifting to, because that's a belief. We say, oh, that's just the basis of life. No, that's a belief. That's a theory. So really believing, that collaboration is what's going to get us forward, and not competition, and not division, but unity. So, brother, this was a great conversation. I'd love to give you the final word, and we will close out.
Yeah, just want to say thank you as always. So beautiful to share, and it comes back to right community or common unity. Like if we come back to that, we'll all be good.
Yes, we will. And, we're getting there together, my friend. So appreciate you. Thank you for, shining your light as always. And looking forward to every and all conversation we have moving forward.
Yeah, sounds good. I hope.
Have a great day, my friends. Thank you for listening. Peace, Zach.
Peace.